Chapter 13. Row 82 stopped the engine on his truck, but left the lights on. He shrieked loudly and paused. He smiled as several men in red cloaks emerged. One of them had gold trim on his cloak, clearly the leader of the group. "I've got one of them, and he is alive, just as you requested," said Row 82. Several of the men went to the back of the truck and dragged Sig, who was still entangled in the net that caught him, away. "It's the large one," shouted one of the men. "Impressive," said the leader. He handed a credit drive to Row 82. He inserted it into his payment device. "Payment verified," said Row 82 as he handed the drive back to the leader. "It was agreeable to do business with you." "Likewise," said the leader. Row 82 climbed into his truck and drove away as he watched them drag Sig inside their icy fortress. Their leader followed them as they opened the doors to an underground hall. The doors shut behind them as they pulled Sig into a room with a table. With a great deal of effort, the men heaved Sig onto the table and shackled him to it with his stomach against its surface. Having bound him, they cut the net off of him and searched his pockets. They removed his cloak, his guns and ammunition, his knives, and his boots, and placed them in a pile. Before long, they determined he did not have the thing for which they were looking. "It's not here," said one of the men. "Wake him up," said the leader. One of the men punched Sig in the face. Sig slowly opened his eyes and attempted to get up. He quickly realized that he was immobilized. He turned his head as best he could and noticed the red cloaks on the men surrounding him. Sig smiled widely, revealing a bit of blood on his teeth where he had been struck. "It's not often we find prisoners that are pleased to find themselves in our presence," said the leader. Sig laughed, choked, and coughed, but he maintained his smile. The cloaked men looked at one another in confusion. "Pleased," said Sig. "Yeah, I thought I might be in trouble, but it's just a bunch of fire demon worshippers." One of the men hit him in the face again. "Perhaps your assessment of the risk to yourself was a bit premature," said the leader. "Yeah, perhaps," said Sig, maintaining his grin. "What do you want this time?" "Straight to the point, I see," said the leader. "All right, we have heard that your group has acquired the Key of Origins. We want it." Sig laughed loudly. "A demon worshipper that wants a divine key," laughed Sig. "That's great." One of the other demon worshippers punched Sig in the face again. Sig spit out some of the blood oozing from his lips and smiled. "We believed you were the one in possession of it," said the leader. "However, we did not find it on your person." "You touched my guns?" said Sig angrily. "Oh, that is not cool." The leader tilted his cloaked head. "You are not taking this as seriously as you ought to," he said. The leader pointed to Sig's back. One of the men ripped his shirt, revealing a partial ring of runic letters branded into his back. The men gasped. "Well, this is a surprise," said the leader. "It would seem you've been here before." Sig laughed. "And since you do not have the entire passage on your back, that means you talked." "Yeah," said Sig. "Sure it does." "Don't feel bad," said the leader in a patronizing tone. "You'll be giving up information for a worthy cause." The leader reached for a rack of brands near their fireplace. One of his men handed him a brand. The leader checked that it featured the symbol he desired and then gripped a black key dangling from a chain about his neck. The metal end of the brand began to glow a dark red color. He slowly walked towards Sig's face to show him the glowing brand. The warmth of the metal was actually soothing to Sig's face as the leader showed him. Being in Row 82's truck in the cold zone had made his nose and ears painfully cold. Sig smiled widely in response to the leader's attempts to intimidate him. "I just don't seem to be getting through to you yet," said the leader, "but hopefully this will help you understand the importance of my request." The leader pressed the hot metal against a bare section of Sig's back. He winced in pain as he heard his flesh sizzle. The leader smiled as he watched Sig's smug expression get replaced by one of pain. After another few moments, the leader pulled the brand off of Sig's back. A tiny puff of smoke floated up from the tip of the brand. "Wait, don't take it off. I was just starting to get warm," said Sig with a grin. The leader shook his cloaked head in frustration. "Your words are brave," said the leader as he traded brands with one of his men and began heating it with his key. "But you will tell us where the key of origins is." Sig's smile turned into a grimace as his flesh sizzled again. About a mile away from the icy castle, Jennifer suddenly appeared with glowing eyes gripping her key. Lizard, Lucas, Daniel, Kirana, Jonathan, and Victor appeared all around her. Her eyes immediately stopped glowing, and she slumped to the ground in exhaustion. Victor immediately put his arm around her to steady her. "This is it," said Lucas with a smile. Daniel offered a canteen to Jennifer and helped her lie down. Sweat had beaded up on her forehead, and she breathed heavily. The cold air made each breath visible. "You've overexerted yourself," said Daniel with a frown. "Did it help?" asked Jennifer. "Yes," replied Lucas. "We never would have been able to travel this far without your help, Jennifer." "The cost for this speed was too high," said Daniel. "She is in serious condition." "Then stay here with her, Doctor," said Kirana. "We will get Sig." "I'll stay too," said Victor. Jennifer smiled but shook her head. "No, I'll be fine," said Jennifer. "Go with them." Lucas, Kirana, Lizard, and Jonathan began walking immediately toward the ice castle. Victor lingered for a moment more. "Take care of her, Doctor," said Victor. Jennifer beamed and her breathing calmed. "Yeah, since she won't take care of herself," mumbled Daniel. "Just get Sig," said Jennifer with a smile. "You should value your life more than you do," scolded Daniel. "This little bit of time is nothing compared to how precious your life is." Victor turned and ran to the others. "Be careful," whispered Jennifer as she watched his long dark cloak trail after him in the snow. Lucas led the group through the icy holes. The snow on the ground crunched under their feet, and Kirana became uneasy. Lizard, who had scurried ahead, motioned for the others to join him. He pointed out a set of recent tire tracks in the snow. "That's Row 82's truck," said Lizard. "Good work," said Lucas. The group moved quietly to the thick, translucent walls of the ice fortress. In the places where the wall was intact, a thinner concrete wall was visible under the ice. There were also places where boulders from siege had melted through and shattered the concrete, and then subsequently refroze. It was clear these walls were never intended to protect against heavy siege, but they would stop bullets and weapons from light fighters. This far south, it would have seemed like a waste to fortify against serious siege weapons, but the boulders embedded in the shattered and refrozen sections of wall represented visible evidence that this castle was unprepared for what had come. Jonathan watched Kirana's reactions as they moved. She appeared to be getting angrier with every step. He wanted to say something to her, but their last conversation had gone so poorly that he was afraid to speak. She did not seem to want to speak to anyone either. He glanced down at his divine key. He knew that he could ask her what she was thinking and get an honest reply without her even knowing. He closed his eyes and shook his head. He would not abuse his gift to fulfill his personal curiosities. He just wished she would not bottle in her emotions. To his surprise, Kirana's voice broke his focus. "Are you sure there is a divine key here, Lucas?" she asked. "Yes," said Lucas. "You've been here before?" asked Victor. She furrowed her brow and turned away. "You grew up here," said Victor, perceiving some of the motivation behind her reaction. "I wasn't finished growing up when I had to leave," said Kirana coldly. Victor decided it would be best not to press the issue. The light of the moons up above lit the snow around them. The stars shined brightly in the clear sky. Lucas shivered with cold as he moved. Jonathan brought his fingers up to his armpits to warm them. The cold here was brutal, and notwithstanding the general desire to find Sig, they knew that they would need to find shelter soon. Kirana was the only one who seemed to be unaffected by the cold. She remained alert and looked around with a frequency that made even Lizard think she was paranoid. Suddenly Kirana pulled out her sniper rifle and looked through the scope at a point in the distance. "Stop!" she hissed. She whirled around and fired her rifle at the arm of a red-cloaked guard who was patrolling the area. He had a flamethrower pointed toward them, but Kirana's shot flung his arm up so that the blast of fire was unable to hit anyone. A moment later, Lizard scurried behind him and snapped his neck. "Take the flamethrower," said Lucas. "We've already been spotted, and I'm not going to lie, that blast of fire actually felt good." Lucas did not want to have the apparatus strapped to him, so Victor unhooked it and put it on. "We need to split up," said Kirana. "They will be patrolling the whole area, and flamethrowers are more effective on large groups than smaller ones." As she was finishing her point, a pair of red-cloaked guards began rushing toward them. As they got near, Victor rushed toward them and blasted them with a stream of fire. They retreated before the flames could reach them, and then began circling around Victor. A few moments later, Jonathan and Kirana leapt toward them and slashed them with their swords. "Jonathan, can you detect how many guards are around?" asked Victor. "It's difficult to get a focus on that generally," said Jonathan. "Distances don't always match up exactly in the mind realm." "We don't need the details of their thoughts," said Lucas. "Just an idea of how many opponents we have would be helpful." "I'll try," said Jonathan. He gripped his key and his eyes began glowing. His body slumped down into the snow immediately. "Well, that's not what I expected," said Victor with a frown. "And it means we can't split up yet," said Kirana. "We have to protect him until he is done." Victor and Lucas nodded in agreement. Lizard rubbed his temples as if the entire process was wearying him. Victor pulled Jonathan over his shoulder as they began to move towards some boulders and rubble where they would have more protection. Victor breathed heavily as he began walking. "I wish Sig were here," he said. "This would be easy for him." Kirana had been watching Jonathan nervously. She had hoped to see his glowing eyes shining in the darkness for a few moments, and then return with the information they needed in order to get Sig. He had been motionless with glowing eyes for 6.5 minutes. "How long do you think it will take?" Kirana asked Lucas. "I don't know," replied Lucas. "His key is in a totally separate category from mine." "Isn't your key supposed to know about all the keys in all the categories?" said Kirana in a frustrated tone. Suddenly Lizard screamed, holding the sides of his head, and ran off. Kirana and Lucas spun around. "What the?" said Victor. "I'm going after him," said Lucas. "You two stay here with Jonathan." Without waiting for a response, he rushed off. "You realize that guards are going to come to 2 places," said Kirana with a frustrated tone. "Here because they heard the scream here, or there because they see Lizard flipping out." Victor pulled out a pistol with his free hand and held the flamethrower in the other. "But moving will make us more vulnerable," said Victor as he looked around, "so it looks like we're staying here for now." Only 2 minutes had passed when a pair of red-cloaked guards with flamethrowers rushed toward them. Kirana took them out with her sniper rifle as soon as they appeared on the snowdrifts. They instantly fell down, darkening the snow with their blood as they rolled to the bottom of the hills. A siren echoed throughout the fortress as a dozen men in white coats carrying machine guns emerged from one of the buildings. "Looks like we're through sneaking around," said Kirana with disappointment. She pulled Jonathan behind the biggest chunk of concrete as bullets began to kick up small puffs of snow all around them. "Where are you, Jonathan?" whispered Kirana. "I could really use your help." Of course, Jonathan could not respond. His consciousness was only aware of the mind realm. Jonathan had opened his eyes to find the cold sensation in his fingers gone. The walls of ice and concrete around him had taken on a blue glow, indicating that he was in the mind realm. He slowly got to his feet. The screech of a hawk caused him to whirl around. "Sam!" called Jonathan with excitement. Sam flew down and landed on Jonathan's outstretched forearm. "I'm glad to see you." Sam screeched softly, as if returning the greeting. "I guess I need to figure out where Sig is before I can get an idea of how many demon worshippers we have to defeat to get him," said Jonathan, looking around. He began walking through the snow. It was so much nicer not to need to stuff his fingers in his armpits to keep them warm. The interior of the castle contained a lot of open space. It surprised Jonathan that the walls seemed so removed from the interior structures. He wondered if there had once been more on the inside that had been buried under ice and debris. With the distraction of the cold and with the increase of light, he suddenly began to appreciate the architecture of the structure. There were great towers at regular intervals along the unbroken sections of the outside wall. They appeared to be made of stone instead of the concrete that bound them together. It seemed as though the towers were built first, and the concrete walls had been a later addition. The ice surrounding the walls had been assembled using well-formed blocks. He noticed the remnants of spiral staircases and icy buttresses that added support as well as cover from light attacks for those that might defend the walls. The red cloaks of the guards stood out less in the blue ambience of the mind realm, but Jonathan began to see them scattered in various ends of the complex. "I hate patrol," said one of them. "If I were to kill the leader, would I have enough support to become leader myself?" asked another. "I could snap his neck, or stab him quickly, or poison him." Jonathan furrowed his brow in anger, although this type of thinking was known to be common among demon worshippers. "I don't know what the leader's fascination with that bunker is," whispered another. "If it has such a powerful weapon, then why didn't it save them from us?" This piece of information was far more interesting. Jonathan gripped the soul key as he stepped toward the guard that had mumbled it. "Are there any prisoners in the bunker?" asked Jonathan. "No," responded the guard. "He won't let anyone in it." "Where are the prisoners kept?" asked Jonathan. "There is an underground building that is used for interrogation further south," said the guard. There were several more guards, but they seemed to shift around, making it difficult to tell how many he had counted. As he continued moving, a man called out to him. "Hello there," called the man. Jonathan turned. To his surprise, the man was looking directly at him. "Hello?" said Jonathan in a confused tone. "Welcome back," called the man. He jogged toward Jonathan. His long dark cloak seemed to flutter as he ran. Suddenly Jonathan recognized him. It was Victor. "Victor," said Jonathan with surprise. Victor laughed. "Is that who you think I am?" he asked. Jonathan smiled. "Right, you just look like Victor," said Jonathan. "What brings you to the mind realm again?" asked Victor. "I'm trying to help my friends," explained Jonathan. "One of them has been captured by demon worshippers." "Always your friends," said Victor with a smile. "That is very kind of you." "I owe them," said Jonathan. "Sig has saved me many times, and my other friends are putting themselves in danger to save him. I need to help them." "Even more so now," said Victor. Jonathan raised an eyebrow in confusion. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Many things," replied Victor. "I am not certain you understand the dangers of coming here." "Oh," said Jonathan, "you mean my physical body is vulnerable while I am here?" "Well, yes," said Victor, "that's part of it. Even though time passes differently in the mind realm, sometimes your body will be left defenseless." "My friends are watching over me," said Jonathan confidently. "Very loyal of them," said Victor, "but that may make them vulnerable at times. There are other risks as well." "What kind of risks?" asked Jonathan. "There are creatures that have little power in the physical realm, but great power here," explained Victor. "If you were to find one of these creatures, it could harm your mind permanently." "What can I do?" asked Jonathan. "I have to help my friends." "Your key is more than just a tool for speaking here," said Victor. "It is a sword and a shield, a weapon and a defense." "How do I use it?" asked Jonathan. "With your mind," answered Victor. "The more powerful your mind is, the more powerful you will be here. You are not invulnerable here, and you are not even the most powerful mind here. Use caution." "Thank you for warning me," said Jonathan. "I'm not done," said Victor. "There is something else which you may have noticed. Using a divine key has a cost. Nothing is free." "Hang on," said Jonathan as he remembered the effort that Jennifer had exerted to try and get them to the ice castle. "Is Jennifer Cedar okay? She used a lot of power from her key to get us here quickly." Victor's eyes grew wide as he heard Jonathan mention Jennifer. "Jennifer Cedar?" asked Victor in shock. "Now how would you possibly know anything about her? The attunement is closer than I thought." Victor tilted his head to the side as if trying to determine how this information might fit into his understanding. "What?" asked Jonathan after a suspenseful pause. "Nothing. Never mind," said Victor. Jonathan frowned and narrowed his eyes. He had little desire to decipher Victor's cryptic message. "It's not my place to say. Just keep in mind that you aren't a machine. None of you. Don't rely too much upon your keys." Victor began to fade away. "How much is too much?" asked Jonathan as Victor disappeared. He frowned and then turned to Sam. She gave a short shriek as if she were saying, "Don't look at me." "I guess that means we better head back, Sam," said Jonathan. He began moving toward the drifts of snow and debris behind which the others had hidden. After a few moments, Sam leapt into the air and shrieked loudly. Jonathan whirled around defensively. He saw no one. Sam remained overhead, circling as if trying to identify something for Jonathan. He looked into the distance and noticed a dark figure scurrying behind snowdrifts. "Lizard?" asked Jonathan in confusion. The dark figure scurried straight toward Jonathan. Jonathan smiled as he identified the figure as Lizard. "Hello," said Jonathan. Lizard rushed toward him and punched him in the face, knocking him unconscious.